Hello, everybody. We got a great show for you today. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us. We do have on the show a lot of coverage today about that rail strike. You've been hearing so much about it. It's been dominating the headlines. So the House of Representatives, they approved a bill to force the rail companies and workers to accept a pending agreement. It also passed a separate measure to add 7 days of paid leave. As part of this agreement, a key demand of the employees. And we'll take a look at some of the, the various financial incentives here, including what the Democrats were doing and how the left has forced their hand with the Branko Marcic article in Jacobin. Also, reporting from Daniel Bogasaw and Ryan Grimm about how railroads have invested pretty heavily in Congress and why they could get their payoff in the U.S. Senate. Philadelphia DA, that's District Attorney Larry Krasner, really give the Democrats kind of a lesson on crime. It'll be interesting to see if they choose to listen. Meanwhile, after Sam Bankman Fried's downfall, the entire crypto fantasy is rapidly unraveling. We'll take a look, I think that last segment hopefully is just going to be, it manifests as just this segment embodiment of the Twitter account Crypto Bros posting L's. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but it got me coming in off of that bivalent booster. 4 shots are in my body as of today. It's pretty crazy, honestly. I really, it's a university requirement. That's all I'll say. Welcome to Newsflash. All right, so we got to talk today about this House agreement. So this all comes kind of off of a rail strike and this kind of disputes with the rail companies and with these kind of key industries. It is interesting because the president and Congress actually have, I think there's some law, I don't know the exact law, but there is, yes, the Railway Labor Act that Congress passed that allows them to have some pretty kind of undue control on kind of, they can impose deals on and they can use their power to enforce the deals that they impose. The government can. So what Congress has to say on this is a big and very kind of interesting deal. President Biden a couple months back put together this board, this group of people to kind of work together to impose the best deals. The unions, they wanted various things, including 7 days of sick leave. They had paid sick leave, and they had previously had none. So anytime you are sick, you are losing money, you are not getting paid in a situation like that. These are the people who are the essential workers who kept our economy going through COVID. So it does seem like, these people, it did seem for a long time, the unions are outside. They're protesting. They set this deal up, and really no one seemed to really like it. Or at least 55% of the unionized workforce on the railways seemed not to like it because Biden, the most pro-labor president, simply said, we will not be giving you any sick days. We'll give you some of the concessions about what you want. Give you a little bit of better raises, I think was the concession that he gave. And really, what happened today was the House resoundingly approved legislation to avert a nationwide rail strike by imposing a labor agreement between rail companies and the workers, as lawmakers rush to shield the economy from the threat of a holiday season work stoppage and prevent disruption in shipping across the country. And again, there's obviously in the coverage of this, the mainstream media coverage of this, you're not going to see any kind of this is what we mean when we say like bourgeoisie media. It's like they're really catering to a small sect of people, and these are the there's some ever smaller sect of people who are now feel like they're engaged in and can change politics because they read the media, they watch the news, they imbibe all this stuff, and those are the people. They don't give a flying fuck about other railroad workers and people getting paid and workers' rights and things like that, and they don't see how it could affect them because their industries for people like them, it won't affect their industries. It's no reason for them to care about kind of the plight of the average worker, the person who brings the Amazon package, puts it on the train, and sends it to them for the holiday season. But the real crisis for them, for that sect of society, is if that Amazon package doesn't come in time, because then you start to see, okay, we're getting into the we're getting into this is like societal chaos. Things aren't coming in time. Society is breaking down. That just contributes to just such an existential threat because there's no really such, well-defined things in politics anymore. It's just like these vague senses and vague feelings that can be brought on by these various triggers. And I don't know what could be worse than your package not coming in time in the holiday season. If you're your average New York Times, MSNBC reader, or even your average Fox News, New York Post reader, you're just going to have two different reactions to the same event. Acting quickly, the day after President Biden made a personal appeal at the White House, the House passed a measure that would force the rail companies and employees to abide by a tentative agreement the Biden administration helped broker earlier this year, which increased pay and set more flexible schedules for workers. So the bill passed on a bipartisan vote of 290 to 137, and still the flexible schedule. Maybe it was like I think it was like they get a little bit better on kind of off time, whatever downtime at the job, but they did not get still any paid sick days from the Biden deal. And at this point, you had these frauds, Josh Hawley and Marco Rubio, coming out to very legitimately, frankly, in this case, outflank. I don't know if had Trump been in power would they've been saying this. I don't know. Had they been actually able to, have the legislative power to enact it and not just make Biden look bad, I don't know if they would have been saying this, but they kind of came out, they outflanked Biden and said, hey, listen, you are, I can't support this deal. It doesn't give the workers what they want. A lot of these workers, by the way, they're Trump supporters. They're people who, by all accounts should be voting Democrat. Their class interest is in voting Democrat, but their cultural interest, their cultural affiliation is much more tied to the Republicans. And now the Republicans are starting to recognize that and at least, signaling this kind of class interest, class alignment that, frankly, I believe, and, I think a smart person would say that they do not have. With the New York Times framing this as liberal Democrats threatening to withhold their votes unless the legislation granted additional paid leave, a key demand of workers, the House also considered and approved a separate measure to add 7 days of compensated sick time to the compact. The measure passed largely on party lines 221 and 207 as Democrats sent it to the House with the support of just 3 Republicans, Don Bacon, John Katko, and Brian Fitzpatrick. It's kind of relatively working class areas. They all represent, I think, Brian Fitzpatrick, kind of, the central western part of Pennsylvania. He represents there as a Republican side. So pretty good, the fact that they all, actually went through and supported this 7-day sick leave. So the question is, obviously, it goes to the Senate, but we will discuss it. So with the baby steps, the Democratic Party has taken a more economically progressive, pro-working class politics over the past 2 years. It still shouldn't be forgotten that it's still a corrupt, out-of-touch party divorced from any such tradition. And with his loss of the 2020 Democratic primary, it's easy to forget the value of Bernie Sanders' continuing presence in American political life, especially in the U.S. Senate. Yet the events of the past 24 hours clearly serve as reminders of both, as Branko explains. For the past week or so, Congress has been consumed by the prospect of a looming and potentially monumentally disruptive strike by rail workers who have spent the last 3 years negotiating with rail carriers for a better contract centered on their lack of right to take paid time off work if they fall ill. All 4 unions, representing more than half of the unionized rail workforce, rejected a deal put together by President Joe Biden's White House and a panel of experts that didn't do enough to fix these grievances and literally didn't get them any paid days off. Labor Secretary Marty Walsh and eventually congressional leaders themselves pushed for congressional intervention to end the stalemate, effectively forcing rail workers to accept the deal anyway, in the process stripping the workers of leverage in negotiations. Again, supposedly the most pro-labor president and administration ever, and outflanked by someone like Marco Rubio on this probably the most marquee issue of labor rights that we've seen yet in the Biden administration, other than maybe like Amazon. That Biden could actually do in and weigh in effect. He could have a massive impact here by essentially putting in a pro worker deal, because if you look at the position the rail industry in, it's in a profitable position. It can take incredible profit, and it should. The really remarkable thing is if the government were to kind of step in and do a very rare thing that we see governments do and say, hey, enough is enough. You can share some of this wealth. And that is something that, we're going to make you do with our power, and we're actually going to stick up for these people. And it's really kind of a remarkable thing because you just never, ever see it. And it does seem to have been done here, not to have been done here by Joe Biden, and which is, I think, is a pretty big deal. So in a statement on Monday calling for Congress to end the impasse, again, Biden misleadingly hailed the White House broker deal that cut the legs out from under railroad workers as a grand victory agreed to by both sides. Casting himself as a proud pro-labor president, he stressed the potential economic downsides of a rail strike to explain why he was reluctantly overriding the views of those who voted against the agreement, meaning striking rail workers, essentially saying that he is too weak to say, you know what, this is something that we can actually make a good deal. I'm going to have my people. I'm the president. I control who the labor sector is. I control what my labor department does. I'm going to make sure that it comes in a deal that actually supports workers. I'm going to get Marty Walsh on the same page. Shouldn't be that hard. If you really appointed the right guy, but so still, it's just something that he chose not to do. I think it's an important thing to say. So Congress modified the deal for the workers' sake, claiming any changes, saying they couldn't do that, claiming that any changes would risk delay and a debilitating shutdown, even though the union set the strike deadline for December 9th, nearly 2 weeks out from when he put out the statement. Ironically, the president has ended up to the right of where he was in the 1990s, where then the Senator Biden was arguably the terrible peak of his neoliberal transformation, yet voted against letting Congress to end a major rail strike. Rail workers have understandably savaged Biden, while big business groups have sung his praises. So, rail workers, it's really been, Hugh Sawyer said, he's a Rail Workers United treasurer, Joe Biden blew it, he said in a press release. He had the opportunity to prove his labor-friendly pedigree to millions of workers by simply asking Congress for legislation to end the threat of a national strike on terms more favorable to workers. Sadly, he could not bring himself to advocate for a handful of lousy sick days. The Democrats and Republicans are both big pawns of big business and the corporations, Sawyer has said. And good for him. The Brotherhood Maintenance of Way Employees Division, the third largest rail union in the U.S., said in a statement it was deeply disappointed with Biden's decision to appeal to Congress to force the agreement. It's not enough to share workers' concerns. The union, representing about 23,000 maintenance workers, continued a call to Congress to act immediately to pass the legislation that adopts tentative agreements that exclude paid sick leave, ignores railroad workers' concerns. That is a great point. And I think it's like, they have no real power here unless there's like kind of a threat that comes with it. We're going to do this because, you did this. If they can't strike, if that takes away their ability to strike, what power do they have other than just saying the stuff to the New York Post? So they balked out of the tentative agreement because the paucity of paid or medical leave, but it includes one additional compensated day off for personal leave. With the passage of the bill, the House took the first step to compel all 12 unions to accept that deal. It was the first time since the 1990s that Congress had used the power under the Railway Labor Act to intervene in a national rail labor dispute. Leaders in both parties said they were reluctant to do so, and some Democrats, particularly progressives, are deeply frustrated about being called to override the will of rail workers pressing for basic rights. At the end of the day, we really believe that our work is to have the right to paid leave, and it's going to be interesting to see if Cori Bush says that, but it's going to be interesting to see if she can actually get other people to stand by that. I think that's something that very, very much remains to, and it just frankly hasn't happened. We're seeing that again and again. But let's get back to the idea here. The Jacobin article. So the political malpractice was on display. Here became more clear when the Republicans used this idea to kind of become pro-worker. So the abysmal state of affairs started to get a little bit better on the Democratic side when we saw Bernie Sanders kind of come out and make the first statement to say, like, hey, you know what, this is a problem. Sanders made clear for months that he would back whatever decision rail workers made, and had criticized billionaire Warren Buffett, who owns the parent company of BNSF Railway, earlier this week, pointing out that in one day, Buffett made twice as much as it would cost to guarantee 15 paid sick days a year to every rail worker in America. More important, when Democrats got in line behind the president and the party leadership, Sanders, who had withheld his support for the president's agreement for months and blocked Republicans' earlier attempts to ram the inadequate deal through, criticized the plans and made clear he'd block any such legislation until 7 paid sick days for rail workers are included. So it's going to be interesting to see if they really try and I think what Bernie has to do is make sure that this bad deal. So what they did is, the classic Democratic move, they separated it. They broke it up into 2 separate parts. They said, you know what, we're going to do, just like they did with the freaking Build Back Better, they're doing this again with the railroad workers. There's a separate additional provision that says the 7 days paid sick leave, which is what the workers actually want. That is being taken out. It's being separated, in the House and Senate. It passed through the House. It may not pass through Senate. And Bernie Sanders has to stand up and block, which he can do, the main deal from passing without the additional deal. It just needs to happen, by all accounts. He was joined by a number of left-wing lawmakers like Squad member Jamal Bowman, who called it an inhumane deal being pushed on the workers even after a majority voted it down. AOC and Rashida Tlaib said, and Cory Bush supported it. Before long, Sanders made plans to introduce an amendment in the Senate to the legislation mandating 7 days' worth of sick leave for the rail workers, joined by Bowman doing the same in the House, daring Republicans to vote against it, saying, quote, "Look, you have a number of Republicans who claim to be supporters of the working class," Sanders told Chris Hayes last night. "They claim to be supporters of the working class. Well, if you're a supporter of the working class, how are you going to vote against the proposal which provides guaranteed paid sick leave to workers who have none right now?" He's got a good point. These efforts rapidly rearranged the political terrain, with Pelosi suddenly and subtly shifting position late in the day, announcing plans to allow lawmakers to vote today to add 7 days, which they did, to pass paid sick leave to the agreement. Previously silent lawmakers like Garcia expressed support for the move, and Ilhan Omar. It all culminated in the House passing 7-day sick leave amendment just now by a vote of 221 to 207, with all Democrats and only 3 Republicans voting in favor, like we just talked about. Despite the dearth of the House GOP support for the measure, Republican Senator John Conrad had predicted it could get the required GOP support to reach 60 votes of in the Senate, because there will be a lot of sympathy for providing sick leave for the workers. So Conrad saying he wants to do that. 60 votes need to get past that filibuster. In many ways, this is something of a repeat of the events at the close of 2020. When Sanders and the other progressives in Congress, with the belated aid of Hawley, forced the foot-dragging of then-President Donald Trump, President-elect Biden, and Democratic leadership, all reluctantly back to another round of stimulus checks. But whether progressives will succeed here is an open question, and one that will largely depend on how many Republicans see it within their political interests, as they did when they just voted to legalize marriage equality, to move to the center, away from their long-standing hostility to workers' rights. Whatever happens, this has been another sign of the modest but significant political shift that's taken place in U.S. political life, thanks to the larger prominence of Sanders and progressive allies in Congress, the resurgence of labor militancy, and an organized socialist movement in recent years. 40 years ago, a Republican president dealt a terrible blow to the union movement by breaking an air traffic controller strike. Decades later, Republicans may force Democratic administration into a more pro-worker position, following the lead of an openly socialist senator. How things change in America. We'll have to follow this story for you here very closely, but another angle on this is the money. So, this is in The Intercept here. A showdown over a looming railroad strike heads to the Senate floor this week after a group of progressive Democrats, as we know, led by Jamal Bowman and Bernie Sanders, pushed this agreement. So, we kind of really go back. This is Marco Rubio coming out in support of it. John Conrad saying she's in support of it, but it is, as Sanders said on MSNBC, a put up or shut up moment for representatives, saying if you can't vote for this to give workers today who have had really hard jobs, dangerous jobs, if you can't guarantee them paid sick leave, don't tell anybody you stand with working families. It's a pretty good way of putting it. The lawmakers scrambled to pass a deal before December 19th. Are scrambling to pass a deal before December 9th, when workers are allowed to strike, and unions have hailed lawmakers' efforts to add sick days to the contract. So, union we just talked about, Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way employees applauds the representatives in Congress and any senators who will stand in support of railroad workers receiving paid sick leave, said Peter Kennedy, spokesperson for the BMWED, which represents tens of thousands of union railroad workers. He told The Intercept the additional legislation needs to pass so that railroad workers will have basic protections against illness. And railroad companies have spent years softening legislatures in preparing for such a moment. So it's kind of making sure that just in case something like this happens, where they really need the support, there's a warm relationship, a warm person, a warm voice picking up the phone on the other end of the line when the railroad companies make these calls. A review of campaign finance records showed that 19 members of Congress who have received at least $10,000 each from railroad companies in the past election cycle. So it's 19 members, spreading out pretty far. Another 130 members have received at least a $1,000 contribution from either rail operators or the Association of American Railroads, the largest industry trade group. According to Open Secrets, AAR, has spent over $3.5 billion in lobbying, consistent with past trends in 1 year. Since 2020, the railroad companies Union Pacific and BNSF, which have both been locked in these tense negotiations with the unions, spent nearly $1.5 million in each in direct contributions and donations to congressional campaign political action committees. The two massive employers, along with the railroad operator Northern Southern, have spent the past decade scaling back their workforces, refusing to give days to sick days to workers, and operating dangerously understaffed trains. The Teamsters, which absorbed the BMWED in 2004, just donated under $1.5 million to political candidates during the 2022 election cycle. BMWED and the two other unions lobby Congress to the tune of $55,000. So it's just a little bit, of a money infusion. It's going to be interesting to see, whose money talks better here, which is very, very interesting. So Kennedy says this should not be a political issue. This is an issue about protecting our workers who ensure the nation's rail infrastructure and supply chain function as best as possible. Representatives on both sides of the aisle should be unanimously supportive of paid sick days for railroad workers, because these companies, they've been profitable, they've been successful for a very long time. It's not like they can plead poverty in a situation like this by any stretch of the imagination. So it's definitely an important story to follow for sure.
My name is Spencer Walsh. This is the Spencer Walsh Radio Network, and if you're listening to one of our podcasts, whether it's Newsflash, Hidden History, The Spencer Walsh Show, or something else, ladies and gentlemen, we have one simple request of you. Please be sure to rate us, subscribe to us if you like us, and leave us a comment, because just like all of you, sometimes we need that feedback in our lives, good or bad. We want to hear what you have to say. So please do those steps, make SWR and content better, and thank you so much for listening.
Ahead of the midterm elections earlier this month, we saw some pretty consistent talking points, especially if you happen to be in any kind of a New York media market. Republicans talked about one thing above all else: crime. They said Democrats were to blame for what they claimed to be an unprecedented spike in crime and spent tens of millions of dollars on ads hammering that message, hoping it would deliver what was widely anticipated to be a red wave. The plan failed, and Democrats emerged victorious, retaining control of several key gubernatorial seats, and in the Senate, they also gained a seat. Democrats who embraced a range of criminal justice reforms won races in tight swing states, including Pennsylvania. The party had one of the most successful midterm cycles under an incumbent president of either party in decades. So it really does seem like that crime attack line did not do the wonders many people thought it does. For some Democrats, success is cause for celebration, but it's also evidence the party should have campaigned harder on criminal justice. One such Democrat, the Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, appointed John Fetterman and Josh Shapiro's races for Pennsylvania Senate and gubernatorial seats, respectively. Both had embraced some of the criminal justice reform, and both faced relentless soft-on-crime attacks and emerged well victorious. It is possible that criminal justice reform, like any other issue that fundamentally touches large numbers of elected voters, could be the salvation of a democracy, Krasner said. It could drastically increase voter turnout. And this is a really interesting thing from someone like Larry Krasner, who really does understand politics and criminal justice very, very well. He's someone who was elected in 2016 and was just out in front in kind of this wave of progressive prosecutors that we've seen and heard so much about in the past. Because that's like, we've seen like the Chesa Boudins, the George Gascons of the world. Those are, people who all came after Larry Krasner. I think Gascon elected in 2020, Boudin in 2018, obviously recalled last year. And that kind of shows you, I think, how successful he has been. And Krasner's remarks came amid an unprecedented effort by Republicans in the Pennsylvania legislature to remove him from office after a series of hearings. An ad hoc committee formed to purportedly address his misdeeds, which relied on flimsy evidence, didn't make a recommendation but vowed to keep investigating Krasner indefinitely. After Democrats won the State House last month, the hardline Republicans sought to push ahead with the impeachment in the lame duck session. After some political wrangling, the Republican leader scheduled the vote and Krasner was impeached. He's awaiting a trial in the state Senate, a logistical predicament given the dwindling session, where impeachment is expected to be an uphill battle for Republicans. So it's going to be something they're going to find a lot of tough time to do, especially if they want to get it done before the session. While Krasner commended Fetterman for embracing his work on the state clemency board in the face of Republicans' attack, the reform-minded district attorney was quick to note that many Democrats shied away from talking about the well-documented ill effects of mass incarceration, rather than the Democratic Party answering directly to this Willie Horton-style attack on big cities that are diverse and attack on big city prosecutors who are reform prosecutors. Rather than the Democratic Party attacking it head-on, they did this dumb thing that sadly they sometimes do, which is go Republican light, get off in the corner, and try not to talk about it. And the areas, it's literally true. The areas where they did that most, they did I will never, ever, I'm going to refund the police. Val Demings in Florida absolutely get crushed. Eric Adams, number one crime guy in New York, maybe second only to Lee Zeldin, the Republican, and, New York, they get absolutely blown out of the water because people know what's going on. They understand the issues. And if there is no even if you're someone like in these kind of local media spaces, if you have Democrats just saying the same exact thing, even if you want to, kind of do a fair coverage, if you hear Eric Adams and Lee Zeldin, functionally giving the same rhetoric on crime, what are you supposed to do? Like the two groups of people, the two forces talking about the news are talking about the news in the exact same way. So it's incredibly tough to, get a good and honest perception of, what's going on here. It's very, very challenging. And I think Larry Krasner with excellent points there. Krasner has been a lightning rod on issues of criminal justice reform since his campaign to become Philadelphia District Attorney in 2017. He ran as an unabashed reformer in a city that jailed more people than any other in the Northeast. He pledged to prosecute police for misconduct, reform bail, and generally saw the pipeline to incarceration in the city. Many of his promises were fulfilled. Some met with fierce resistance. With Republican lawmakers attempting to strip his authority. Krasner prevailed and sailed to re-election last year against a police-backed challenger. So, this kind of stuff, when you are proud in your policies, when you know what you are saying is right and true, you will do, you'll do really quite incredible things, and you'll be, continuously successful, in politics, because I think people vibe with someone who's confident. People vibe with someone who makes sense and is confident in their issues, and not just the pale imitation of exactly what the Republicans are doing. All right. So with that being said, it's now time to move on here to our next story. 4 days after, we're moving on to our next story, which is going to be about crypto. And it is in Jacobin. It's by Hadis Tier. So it starts with this. So what a difference a year makes. This time last year, cryptocurrencies were all the rage. Everywhere you turned, celebrities were hawking them, from Kim Kardashian to Spike Lee to Matt Damon. NFTs, a crypto offshoot that assigns blockchain ownership certificates to digital assets, boomed to bizarre heights when cartoon apes sold for millions. And being an estate agent for the virtual land became an actual career. Meanwhile, the oldest and most popular cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, crested on its ever wild ride, a price valuation peaking at around $64,000 about a year ago. So today, Bitcoin's value is plummeting back to earth, currently about $16,000, depending on the day or hour. NFT trading is all but collapsed, and various celebrities are under investigation for promoting the now bankrupt FTX crypto exchange in a class action lawsuit. The last few months have witnessed a series of dramas in the crypto universe, bringing down major players, including Terra, a stablecoin, quote-unquote, suddenly became unstable very, very fast. Celsius, a crypto lending firm, and Three Arrows Capital is a crypto hedge fund. FTX was previously the third largest cryptocurrency exchange, has now collapsed at dizzying speed, and along with it, the finances and reputation of crypto's golden boy, Sam Bankman Fried, a.k.a. SBF. In a few short days in November, FTX went from a $32 billion company with investments from the likes of BlackRock and Sequoia to bankruptcy. And SBF had gone from hobnobbing with Bill Clinton to Gisele Bündchen to a fallen wreckage, in his own words. On November 2nd, a report from CoinDesk found that FTX had used its own exchange-generated tokens, FTTs, in kind of internal currency, printed by FTX itself, to be used on its market to inflate its balance sheet and that of its affiliated trading firm, Alameda Research. The revelations also point to the likely scenario that Bankman Fried had used billions of dollars worth of FTX customer assets to fund Al-Maida's financial bets through a backdoor accounting mechanism that funneled billions of FTX funds to Al-Media without alerting auditors or triggering accounting red flags. 4 days after CoinDesk's report, Changpeng Zhao, CEO of Binance, the biggest crypto exchange, and self under investigation with the U.S. Justice Department for money laundering and sanctions violations, announced that he would sell his stock of FTT tokens. The crypto equivalent of a bank run ensued, and with $6 billion worth of funds withdrawn in 72 hours. Zhao then offered to buy FTX on November 8th, but by the next day, pulled out of the deal, tweeting, "Sad day, tried, but, with the crying face emoji, it's not going to work." This was really kind of a remarkable moment, because really the day the crypto music died. So cryptocurrencies have rightly earned a reputation as tools for criminal activity, scams, and hacks. The earliest days of Bitcoin were defined as ventures such as the Silk Road, a market for illicit goods using Bitcoins. Silk Road was shut down with the FBI, and over $1 billion worth of Bitcoin was eventually seized. Its founder, Ross Ulbricht, using the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts, was arrested for, among other things, contracting the murders of 6 people he believed had stolen his Bitcoin and had otherwise crossed him. But for a decade since, the history of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies have been littered with schemes large and small. The rise and fall of SBF and his crypto empire are so consequential because he was widely perceived as the only guy who would help crypto go mainstream. This is not only because of his liberal, effective altruism credentials, but because he was a proponent of some of the regulation of the industry. Bankman Fried argument for a light-touch regulatory framework made him unpopular among some of crypto's hardcore libertarians, but for mainstream investors to go all in on crypto, the Wild West on the blockchain would have to be tamed at least somewhat. Whatever the anti-establishment pretenses of many of crypto's proponents, at the end of the day, the viability of cryptocurrencies depends on large-scale investment and mainstream adoption. For Bitcoin and the other digital coins to rise in value, let alone for them to be ever used as actual currency, the states and financial institutions so derided by crypto's hardcore proponents have to get in on the action. It's why crypto enthusiastically celebrated when El Salvador adopted the cryptocurrency, which is really crazy. It's why Bitcoin whales are the largest investors in the currency, and they're treated with such reverence. So what did SBF have in mind by light touch? This is a very good sounding term for someone who wants to make a lot of money. But as others pointed out, he wanted to get ahead of more aggressive regulatory measures from the SEC, positioning the smaller CFTC as crypto's regulator. The FTX was registered and licensed by the CFTC and had hired many former CFTC officials, according to Better Markets President Dennis Kelleher, which obviously created a revolving door effect. But now, essentially, it's all dead. Thank goodness. These things, they'll come. They've fallen. They've come, they've fallen, and they will come again, I think is a big thing that you need to know and understand on this. And it does kind of show that, it just kind of show that by the end of the day, this will continue to come, and when it's too good to be true, it just frankly most likely is. That's all we got for you guys today. This has been Newsflash. Be back tomorrow.